Good morning, everyone. Not good enough. I should do a pulse check. So how many of you had breakfast this morning? Put up your hand. Oh, no, I didn't. I'm on intermittent fasting, so I'm not supposed to eat. Yeah. How many? Show of hands again. Ooh, not bad. And how many of you had coffee this morning? So, and how many of you are half awake trying your best? See, actually, I was trying to look at the teachers more than you, because they are the two important ones, right? Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to another session of the Early Buddhism workshops. We didn't have any workshop yesterday, last year, so I'm pretty happy that we have one this year. And I'm not sure, maybe we kind of mentioned that when we started with the Dhamma project, the fundraising, so this is actually part of that fundraising as well. So how many of you know about the Dhamma project? Okay, almost all? Almost all? Okay, should I just quickly mention what it is? So this project is to provide equal opportunities for women in Sri Lanka to practice and serve on the Buddhist path. And it's a project that's led by Ajahn Brahmali, Ayya, Karunika, Ajahn Hasapanya, and in Sri Lanka is headed by Ayya Sela. So for today's session,
also Ajahn Brahm is also.
And Ajahn Brahm, Ajahn Brahm supports that project as well. We had quite a fair bit of activities that happened over the months because we started early part of this year, or did we start last year? I can't remember now, it's been a while.
We started the fundraising in April.
In April.
But the actual idea started a year before that.
Yeah. Okay. We can have Ajahn Brahmali and Ayya Karunika talk about it later on as well. And I also want to quickly mention that, so this being one of the fundraising events, and you're welcome to make donation by dropping your cash into, there's a donation box at the back. We've also provided a QR code. If you have a credit card, it's easier for you, then you just tag. And at the same time, we had already published on the website that there is a 9-day retreat happening next year from March 6 to March 15 in Jana Grove. It's a retreat that is going to be taught by Ajahn Brahmali and Ayya Karunika. Yeah? And that retreat attendance is actually based on an online auction. So we've had 2 rounds of the auction already. So now we are opening the final round, and we've only got about like 10 spots left. So if you're interested, please bid for a spot, and all the money will go to Dhamma directly. So Jana Grove is not taking any money as well. So this is a truly fundraising for Dhamma project. Yeah? Okay, so with that, as usual, let me just check you're attending the right event. You know what event this is? Children Dhamma School, yes.
Absolutely.
We are children for today. Okay, so we're doing the Gradual Path training as part of the Early Buddhism workshops. And just to go through the program for today, so as usual, we've started at 8:30. And this will go on until about 10:15, 10:30, depending on when we are done. Then we will break for Dana. And the event has 2 sessions that are live streamed, so this being one of them. Then after lunch, we'll come back at 12, but it's only for the people here, so you come back at 12, and we will have a breakout session. So we'll break you guys into like maybe 3 groups or something. There is a topic for you to discuss. Then you come back around like maybe in 20 minutes time, 12:20, and then we'll have a summary of your discussion. Then at 12:30, that's when the teachers will come back, and we will start the second session of live streaming. And this will go on until about 2:30. Then we will be done with today's workshop. And the workshop will run for 5 Saturdays, and the last one being 13th of December, if I'm getting my dates right. And we would have different teachers each time. So today we have Ajahn Brahmali and Ayya Karunika. And next week, we would have Ayya Karunika and Ajahn Mudito. Yeah. So we've got how many monks? 5 monks here? from Bodhiana as well. Okay, so this workshop will run for 5 Saturdays, but it's entirely up to you whether you want to attend the first session or the last session, or you're not available today, you want to come next week, that's fine as well, yeah? So what else should I mention? Okay, so today, I asked whether you guys had coffee this morning. I think you need coffee throughout the day, because we have an action-packed day. So besides the workshop that will finish that finishes at 2:30, then we will have the usual meditation class from 3 to about 4 o'clock, 4:15. Then we have another fundraising event. That is the head shaving. So we've got, was it 5 or... I think we've got 5 people who have volunteered to have their head shaved. So the event will start at 4:30. But I'm thinking we might have to start earlier. So depending on... So Ayya Karunika will be teaching the meditation class in the afternoon. So I'm hoping that we can finish earlier, maybe about like 4:15. Then we would start the head shaving. So for those of you who are supporting the people who are doing the head shaving, please hang around, join the meditation class, and then we'll try to end the class early. Then we will start the head shaving. And then at 5 o'clock, so we're not done yet. I hope you guys have the energy. So at 5 o'clock, we'll have a very exciting event. It's the book club. And the book is, I want to say, Flowing to Freedom.
That's wonderful.
Anyone knows what the book is all about, or who is behind the book? Actually, it's the 2 of them, because Ayya Karunika put the book together, isn't it, Ayya Karunika? Yeah. So they'll be discussing the book, yeah, and then the book is available at the library, and the proceeds actually goes to support Santi Monastery, which is where Ayya Karunika is based, yeah. So are you all clear about the events for today? Can you all commit to staying until the end of today? We have coffee and tea and whatever that you need in there. Okay, so before I hand over to the teachers, any questions from anyone? Otherwise, you can always come and see me anytime. I'll be here. Okay, so with that, let me hand over to Ajahn Brahmali.
I'm just going to do the most important ceremony of the day, which is plunging the coffee ceremony.
You know, Ajahn, we had a long discussion. I had a long discussion with Renee as to like how to make coffee, because I'm not a coffee drinker. And I was just asking her, do we plunge or do we serve it to you and you plunge? Okay, now it's the ceremony. Ajahn Brahmali is going to plunge the coffee that will mark the start of today's workshop. And we are very grateful, both Ajahn Brahmali and Ayya Karunika, for doing the workshops. This is something that all of us always look forward to. Thank you.
Say when. Okay. Okay. Okay, successful ceremony. So we put this one over here. Yeah. Okay, everyone, welcome. And it is great to be able to come back again and do the Early Buddhism workshops, because this is kind of one of the things that I think this Buddhist society is known for. The idea of going back to the earliest suttas. And I think this is, around the Buddhist world, it is still not properly understood how important this is. The idea of going, the Buddhist textual tradition, the tradition of Buddhist texts, is very, kind of goes over a very long period of time. And every kind of era of Buddhism has new ideas, new ways of thinking about the Dhamma and all of these kind of things. But everything really relies on and rests on the idea of the very earliest texts, which are the texts that come the closest to the Buddha. Yeah, that's why they are the earliest, obviously. And everything looks back to that. Everything relies on that. And without those earliest texts, there is basically no Dhamma. None of the later traditions, none of what Ajahn Brahm teaches here on Friday night, yeah, even his jokes might fall a bit flat without the early Buddhist texts. Yeah, all of that relies on those early Buddhist texts to make sense and to be meaningful. And for that reason, these are absolutely foundational for what Buddhism is about. So it's great to always come back to that and to see what these texts really are about. And to do that properly, what you have to do is you have to, of course, take into account the Pali tradition, because the Pali tradition is very important as far as early Buddhist text is concerned. But also you take into account other traditions of Buddhism, other schools, which also have collected these early Buddhist texts and kept them over the centuries. And this includes various schools of Buddhism, like the Sarvastivadins, a very important school in Buddhism. Dharmaguptaka, maybe not quite as important from our point of view, because it's closer to Theravada. There is the Pugalavadan school. Pugalavadan means the doctrine of the person. Another important early school of Buddhism, and the Mahasangika, which is the great Sangha school. These are kind of the important ones. And as far as possible, you want to see if you can find texts from all of these and compare them. And this is one of the things that you will see as we go through this course, especially today, is the incredible amount of similarity between these schools. And it's kind of extraordinary. These schools started breaking up maybe 100 or 200 years after the Buddha, very soon after the Buddha, especially during the Ashokan period, because Ashoka, the great emperor of ancient India who lived about 260 BC, so it was a long time ago, he had Dhamma missionaries that sent around India, and that is when the various schools started to form based on geographical differences or geographical dispersion, and also some doctrinal developments in the various different schools. And so by comparing these schools and looking at what they have in common, we are going back to the time before Emperor Ashoka, so very, very close to the time of the Buddha. And what we find is that even though this goes back so far, the similarities between the schools is absolutely astonishing, and we will see that this time as well. And what that means, of course, is that the essence of the word of the Buddha, not every word, not every little detail, but the essence of the word of the Buddha is basically still available in the present day. So that is a little bit of background for you. And the sutta, or the theme we're going to look at is called the Gradual Training. And the sutta we're going to talk about mostly is the Chulahatti-Padopama Sutta, which is the Shorter Sutta on the elephant's footprint. And if any of you were here last night, were any of you here last night? Yeah, no? But you heard it online. Okay, so that's good enough, close enough. You would have heard that one of the questions that were given to Ajahn Brahm at the very end of the session was, what is your favorite sutta? And first of all, he said, I like the really simple suttas. And then he said, like the Anattalakkhana Sutta. And I thought, what do you mean, simple suttas? Anattalakkhana is like one of the most profound suttas. And then I think he thought about it, maybe that's not so simple. So then he said, the second one he said was the Chulahatti-Padopama Sutta, which is the one we are doing. And I said to Ajahn, wait, we're doing that on the workshop. Are you reading our mind? What's going on here? I don't know what, maybe he was. I'm not sure what he's up to sometimes. But I don't dare to ask him. It might be a bit rude to ask that kind of questions. So that was really neat, right? Really beautiful. And so that is what we're going to focus on during this workshop. This will be the main sutta. The Shorter Sutta on the elephant's footprint, for those of you who don't know, is found in the Majjhima Nikaya, which are the middle-length sayings of the Buddha, number 27 of that discourse collection. And you can find that online, you can find it in the books or wherever, and you can be able to read this sutta for yourself. I do recommend you, if you have the chance, to read some of the study material that we have online. It's all online, right, Leha? It's all available online, So,
Ajahn, yes, the material will be available online, but currently I think we have an issue where for the online viewers, they are unable to see the slides, but they're all being recorded. Okay. And then eventually we will post all the slides online as well.
Okay, thank you. So that is just a little bit by way of background. The other thing I want to say about this workshop, which I think is really inspiring, and that is that instead of having 1 or 2 presenters, we have 5 presenters for this workshop. So we have 5 sessions with 5 presenters. It means that each presenter gets to do 2 workshops. And so we have 2 bhikkhunis and 3 bhikkhus presenting together. And I think this is a first, at least here in the BSWA, where we have so many monks and nuns presenting together. And I think that is a really, really positive thing, because what you find is that the way of presenting and the way of looking at the Dhamma is going to be a little bit different for each person. And also having both genders represented, I think, is really important to get the right kind of balance. I'm very, very happy that Venerable Karunika is joining me here today. And then we have Venerable Munistra, who will be joining us later on. And then we have Ajahn over there, and also Venerable Sunnyo also coming later on. So that is kind of the one of the new things about this particular workshop. So that is a little bit by way of introduction. Would you like to say anything, Venerable Karunika?
No, you can do your first.
Do first, okay, but please interrupt me at any time. Yeah, actually not any time, but you know what I mean. Yeah, so so okay.
Ajahn, are you still planning to do a short break? Then we'll have the 5 minutes meditation and.
Yes, I think because we only have 2 hours in the morning. We have one break in the halfway, and then that will be it. Yeah, so maybe around 9:30 or something like that. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to look at this gradual training. And this is one of the very kind of core frameworks in the Dhamma that explains how the path actually works. What you find in the suttas is that there are various kind of important frameworks. And how do you know something is important? Well, you know it is important by how often the Buddha talks about something, and also by the variety of different audiences, the kind of people that he's speaking to, etc., etc. And so this is a very important part of this kind of framework, the idea of the gradual training. You find it in many, many places. We will see it later on. And so that's why we want to focus on this. And one of the things that we shall see as we go along here is that basically it is just an expansion of the Noble Eightfold Path. So we will talk about this later on. And what is interesting when you read the suttas is that it is not just the fact that the gradual training is very important, but when you read the suttas, you start to realize that the emphasis of the Buddha is usually on the practice. The Buddha is not very theoretical. The Buddha is not about setting up a philosophical system. That is later. That's like the Abhidhamma is a philosophical system. The Buddha is about pragmatic things. What do we have to do? We have a problem. We want to get out of it. And so I would say 80% of the suttas are about the path, what to do. And the gradual training is one of those very important ways of presenting that path. But what you start to see when you look at the suttas is that many of the suttas have a similar kind of structure, and you can map them onto the gradual training. So you have, like for example, in the Majjhima Nikaya, the middle-length sayings of the Buddha, the second sutta, the Sabbasava Sutta, the sutta on all the defilements. That also has a similar kind of structure, how to overcome defilements in your practice. The fourth sutta is the Bhayabhedava Sutta on fear and dread. Again, similar kind of structure, even though that is the Buddha talking about his own practice. If you look at the details, they sort of map closely to each other. And so in a sense, you can say that almost all the suttas have this kind of structure, more or less. Even Satipatthana practice. You go to the Satipatthana Sutta, it actually also matches onto this fairly well, especially if you take into account the broader way that Satipatthana is talked about in the suttas. So this is like, gives a framework for all the practice, all the Dhamma in the suttas. And this can be incredibly helpful, because what that means is that when you read a sutta, you have something in mind at the back of your mind. It's like you have a skeleton, and you can put all the meat. I hope you're not vegetarian. You have like all the details onto that skeleton of the gradual training, and so you can then. It's easier to understand what is going on because you have an idea of how the Dhamma works. And the Buddha does in fact talk about this in a few places, and he says that anyone who is skilled in teaching the Dhamma should teach in this gradual way. So I'm just giving you a little bit of marketing of why this is important, yeah? So that you kind of, you find an interest in this, because I personally find the gradual training very interesting because of this kind of function of tying so many things together in the suttas. So one of the nice little slides here, this was added by Venerable Karunika, the gradual journey to freedom, and is of course the idea that the gradual training is a journey to freedom, and with every step on the path, every step on this gradual training, you gain more freedom. Is there anyone here who doesn't like freedom? Everyone likes freedom, right? And because it's kind of intuitively obvious that freedom is something very attractive. And so if you are liberating yourself, and we can talk more about this later on, what it is that you're liberating yourself from, but you will feel, if you practice this path in the right way, that there is a freedom arising within. This is just part of what this is about. And also because we're going to talk about this marvelous book put together by Venerable Karunika, Flowing to Freedom. I guess this is part of this as well. You kind of added that one, so we kind of tie in all the whole day gets tied in together into one thing here. Okay. The gradual training. So here we have the word in Pali for gradual training, Anupubba Sikka. Anupubba means like gradual, Sikka means training here. And so the training is gradual. What does that actually mean? Let's look at all of them, Venerable. Might as well look at all of them. Gradual practice, yeah. Anupubba Kirya. Kirya means literally action or activity, like gradual activity. And Anupubba Patipada. Patipada is like Magga, the path, right? So gradual path. And so the idea here, and this is a very important idea, is that the way that the Dhamma is presented by the Buddha is gradual. It is gradual in the way that the Dhamma is presented. Yeah, so the way that you find the Dhamma in the suttas, it is gradual. In other words, it starts at a certain point and it moves forward in a certain direction, starting with the very beginning of the path, ending with awakening. That is how it is presented in the suttas. So it is important, right? It is important because if you don't understand that it is gradual, you might think that you might jump around the path. You might jump from the beginning to the end, or from the middle to the beginning, or whatever. But there is no such jumping in the Dhamma. The Dhamma is a non-jumping kind of teaching. Yeah, it is a teaching where you follow a certain sequence. And not only is the teaching presented in that way, but the practice is also like that. And so the way, when you practice, you will see that the way that your mind develops is also gradual. The mind doesn't jump, like a kangaroo or anything like that. And in fact, if the mind starts jumping too much, it's actually a bit dangerous because it gets imbalanced. If you have this incredible, massive changes in your mind and you're not ready for it, it can be destabilizing sometimes. You don't want to do that. You want to have a gradual, you want to feel comfortable where you're at. And if you don't feel comfortable with it, then it can cause problems. So gradual is good. And so your practice is gradual and the Dhamma is gradual. And so you need then to calibrate your practice with the Dhamma. Yeah, where are you at? How does that relate to the suttas where you are at? Are you, so you have to be honest with yourself. Okay, I'm still having problem with the 5 precepts. Okay, so I'll early on the path. Yeah, okay, I actually got the 5 precepts sorted out, so now I can do a bit of contentment or sense restraint or whatever. So you have to be honest. The idea that you can kind of just jump over the ethics and morality and the virtue part and jump straight to meditation, this causes serious problems in the Dhamma. It is very important to get that gradual training right. So remember that. If you try to skip stages on the path, skip some of these elements, it's going to be basically you're going to destroy your ability to fulfill this path properly. So you have to follow the gradualness. This idea of gradual is a very important one in the Dhamma and something you see. And, sorry. Okay, so here we have this beautiful little saying that you find in the suttas. Yes, just as the ocean slopes and inclines gradually and doesn't drop off all at once, so too on the spiritual path, the training is gradual, the practice is gradual, and the penetration to perfect insight doesn't happen all at once. Yeah, this is actually from the Vinaya Pitaka, this translation, but anyway, it's also found in the Anguttara Nikaya. And this gives you this feeling how things are gradual, just like the ocean slopes gradually. Yeah, okay. So, myth number one. So now we have seen that the path is gradual. So sometimes you hear this idea that enlightenment is instantaneous. Is that true, Venerable? What do you reckon?
I thought like that.
You thought like that?
One day,
Yeah.
I thought that, when I first started, that if I really meditate and really sit and really go for the, the light and stuff, one day, boom, I will get enlightened. When I first started, I think lots of people think, and I see sometimes in retreats, people try to do this. Some people who are new, who doesn't know the teaching that well, they get to understand meditation and they think you get into like really deep meditation. And just after deep meditation, just the enlightenment happened without knowing what enlightenment really is. In fact, this actually happened in this last 9-day retreat, which I was at with Ajahn Brahm. I don't know how much is okay to say without disclosing who, but there was one retreatant who went for it, who is new to Buddhism but was interested in meditation. And later I had a chat with her, and she sort of started to see some lights, and she got excited, and she thought that she could get enlightened in that retreat itself. So she really forced herself, like really put forth a lot of, I don't know how she pushed through. And I believe she ended up in psychosis, and she's actually in the hospital right now, because this is like the wrong way of God. She probably had predisposition for things as well, so it doesn't mean that meditation is bad. But going in the wrong way, this is the danger of not trying to dive into the deep end, like dropping from a cliff, rather than going from the shore in this gradual and go to deep ocean in that way. Some people just try to jump into the deep end like that, and you really crash. So it's important to know, and this is also when they think that enlightenment is kind of like, a light bulb going off, which it isn't.
Yeah. So hold on. Wait.
What happened?
Don't know. Okay. So exactly. So it is dangerous, because sometimes you haven't done the preliminary things, and then you can end up in kind of with big trouble. So it's important to be gentle with oneself and not kind of force the path when one isn't ready. But this is a very important argument or discussion that's been had in Buddhism for a long, long time, whether awakening or enlightenment happens gradually or whether it happens instantaneously. And certain schools of Buddhism, they have this idea of instantaneous enlightenment. You just sit down and you kind of just wait, and then bang, you become enlightened. But I think that this is dangerous, and it goes against the early suttas. And now you start to see the importance of reading the early suttas right here. Yeah, we can bust some myths, as they say. Yeah, right away, because the word of the Buddha is primary, and then all of these later ideas in Buddhism, well, they have to fit with those early ideas, and if they don't fit with that, well, then there is a problem. And so the idea of instantaneous awakening is not quite right. However, there is some truth to it. Like, as always, things are very complicated. Yeah, things are never one-sided. There is one truth, one is right and one is wrong. Things are a bit more complicated than that. And of course, if you do have a deep insight happening usually after a samadhi, after a deep meditation experience, well, that deep insight, that is, in a certain sense, instantaneous, because you see things all of a sudden, and that will have a profound effect on you. And so the right way of thinking about the path is that it is gradual, but it has occurrences within that gradualness, where suddenly there is a little bit of instantaneousness, and then it's gradual again, a bit more instantaneousness, and then gradual again. So it's a bit more complicated than what we might think. And some of those instantaneous insights that you have are going to be very profound and very life-changing. Like, for example, the most important one being stream entry, probably, where you, for the first time, you understand the Dhamma fully. And so there's a bit of truth to both sides, as always. And so this is probably why the idea of instantaneous enlightenment arose in the first place, because there was some degree of truth to it there from the start. So when we bring the two ideas together, that's when we get the right outcome. However, the idea of instantaneous enlightenment as an overall idea is false, which means that... Oh, busted. Okay, so we have busted one myth. So, but it's interesting because our very close friend Bhante Sujato, he always makes the case that a myth is not something that is false. Very often these days the way the word myth is used on social media, whatever, is something that actually is wrong. But a myth is not something that is false. A myth is often like a story or something that is kind of half true, half not true, or maybe it's beyond truth and false, so it's more like a story or whatever. It has many kind of layers to it. And here too, it is busted, but not quite busted, right? Because we just saw there's some truth to it. Anyway, so let's have a brief look at the significance of the gradual training in the suttas. So we find it in the long discourses, we have it 12 times. Middle length discourses 11 times, connected discourses once, and Anguttara Nikaya twice. This is just a very quick count. It's not very detailed. There probably is more than this actually in there. So Digha Nikaya, the first one, only has 34 suttas. 12 of those are the gradual training. 12 out of 34. The whole first chapter of the Digha Nikaya, which has 13 suttas, 12 of those are the gradual training. And so that's kind of amazing. Majjhima Nikaya, which is a much longer collection, still, it is quite predominant when you have the same sutta more or less 11 times. And then the Samyutta Nikaya, which is more a specialized collection, you only find it maybe once, and then the Anguttara Nikaya. However, one of the important points here is that when you see the gradual training in a large number of places, you might think it's really boring. So many gradual trainings. Is it too many? What do you reckon? After a while you think, another gradual training. Okay, I had enough of this gradual training. But the point is, and one of the things here, first of all, the context of how it is presented is often quite different. From one sutta to the next one. And that context, how it is presented, is important. Because that gives a different flavor to the gradual training, how it applies in particular ways, in particular situations. That's one important point. Context is different. Point number two is that the various gradual trainings are very often not exactly the same. They bring in new elements. They bring in additional little bits in between. And that kind of fleshes out the view, the way we understand this. And so what we will do during this course, we will give the main sutta, which here is the Chula Hattipadopama Sutta, the Shorter Sutta on the elephant's footprint, will be the main kind of starting point. But then we will show you how this can be fleshed out to bring in also various additional perspectives on this. So this is what makes it particularly interesting, that it has all of these different angles. So never think, another kind of sutta, the same one. Don't never think like that. Think instead, what can I learn here? What is special about this sutta? And then, of course, if there are some passages which you have read many times before, okay, you can go those fairly quickly. And then take that special interest. This is the Buddha talking to you. The Buddha is talking to you. The Buddha is talking to little me. Wow, the Buddha is so great talking to me. Do I deserve it? Okay, maybe, I don't know. Okay, I'll read it anyway and see what happens. So this is this is kind of the right kind of attitude. This is the greatest spiritual genius in the history of the world, talking to each one of us. And presumably each of these suttas have a slightly different message. So be open to that message. And then you start to get some emotional response to these suttas. All right. This one?
No, yeah.
No, okay. Wrong. Wow, so difficult. Okay, gradual training. Okay. So now let us have a quick look at what the gradual training actually says.
This is a quick one.
Yeah, it's a quick one. Yeah. So this is the only quick one. So the idea here is that the gradual training can be summarized into a number of headings. So there's lots of details here which we're just going to bypass. These are the main elements, if you like, of the gradual training. Each element has a whole paragraph or something in the actual sutta. So we're going to just look to give you an idea of what we're talking about. We're just going to give you an overview of this gradual training. Later on, we're going to talk about each of these elements in detail. Yeah, if we have time. Leha said we're finishing at 6, but maybe we have to carry on after 6, Leha. We'll see what happens. So uncertain. So it starts off, and this is kind of interesting, it starts off with the Buddha arises in the world and reveals the spiritual practice. Yeah, this is already very interesting that the Buddha arises, because it's not usually what you think of as training, right? What does that got to do with training? The Buddha arises in the world. So that is worthy of a bit of discussion, which we will come to later on, but just kind of getting your ears ready for all of these interesting little points. And then someone hears that teaching, yeah, like each one of us here. We hear that teaching, that's the second one. And then from that, either you gain faith in the Buddha, or maybe you don't gain faith in the Buddha. But in the gradual training, you gain faith. If you don't gain faith, then the training stops right there. So gaining faith matters. And then you go forth from lay life to homelessness.
Ajahn, does it mean that gradual training only applies to us monastics?
I think so.
Oh dear, then what are they doing here?
This is an interesting point, right?
Yeah.
So we'll discuss this later on as well, about who it applies to. Yeah. And then once you have kind of started then begins the proper training. So you have right action. Now you can recognize the Noble Eightfold Path. You have right speech. Actually, this is in the wrong order. Shouldn't right speech be before right action?
You wrote it.
I wrote it, yeah.
Actually, it comes with right action first.
Yeah,
in this one.
But the Noble Eightfold Path has Samaññaphala first.
Right.
Yeah.
But in this
So
one
what's
it
going
is.
on?
I don't know.
Whoa,
Wow.
scary. Okay, anyway, let's see what happens. Okay, then we have contentment. Some beautiful things here. Yeah, you don't see contentment in the Noble Eightfold Path, but you see it here, which is interesting. Sense restraint. Situational awareness. This is Bhante Sujato's translation of Sati Sampajanya, also translated as clear awareness.
Mindfulness and clear comprehension by Bhikkhu Bodhi.
Right, yeah. And then we have seclusion. That's interesting. Seclusion is there in the gradual training. Have you ever considered that before? It's not obvious. Once we start looking at it, you will see it actually occurs right there in the gradual training.
Was the Pali word paviveka for here?
Paviveka or viveka.
Viveka.
Yeah,
Okay.
either one of those, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Then we have the giving up of the 5 hindrances. So that is an interesting one. Giving up the 5 hindrances. You have to do, it's kind of interesting, it comes very late. Why does it come so late? What does that mean? Why does it come after seclusion? Okay, all of these things are important little points that we will be looking at. Then you have the 4 jhanas right there in the gradual training, and again it kind of just makes the importance of the Samma Samadhi and the jhanas on the path very clear. They're always there as part of the practice. Not only the 1 jhana, but the 4 jhanas are there. And the last one is the 3 higher knowledges, the te vijja, which is the outcome of the spiritual practice. So this is the gradual training in brief, all the headings. So what do you think? Is that interesting or not? Yeah, if it's not interesting, then I'm sorry, this is what we're going to be doing here. So I apologize. So anyway, now you know what we're heading for and what this is going to be about. Okay, so now we come to a very brief discussion of just the comparison. As I was saying before, it's important to compare the various versions of the suttas from the various schools. So here we have the Theravada school versus the Sarvastivadin school. The Sarvastivadin school is only found in Chinese translation, so in ancient Chinese characters. And you have to be a specialist in Chinese to be able to read this, because the meaning of characters and things changes a bit over time. And so even if you ask someone who is fluent in modern Chinese characters, still they often can't read the early Chinese. Anyway, so this is exciting. Yeah, how many of these factors, before you press any buttons, Venerable, how many of these factors do you think are going to be the same between Ananda? You're not allowed to say because you have already made an analysis. Ananda, I was going to say Venerable Ananda because it's close to the truth, but Ananda, before this class started, he sent me a detailed comparison of the Sarvastivadin and the Theravada one. So thank you very much, Ananda. That was very, very nice of you. So you cannot answer this question because you know more than me probably about what the comparison is. So how many of these factors are going to be the same between Theravada and Sarvastivada? Remember, these schools separated about 2,300 years ago. So you would expect corruption, right? Maybe complete corruption, maybe nothing in common. That's what I think is most likely, and nothing in common at all is going to be completely different. It's going to be starting with, I don't know what it's going to start with. You shave your head, yeah, start with that or something like that. A completely different thing, yeah. So maybe nothing in common. I don't know, what do you think? Anything in common between these two? A lot in common, right? That's the whole point, of course. And you know 50%? This 50% maybe? Yeah. 55, maybe 55 at the stretch.
Who thinks about 50% roughly around that kind of ratio? Hands up.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Some people think, okay.
Okay, 50%. Okay, that's very nice. But now you will be surprised, right? So here, let's go. And look, compare those two lists. Press one more, we'll see the difference. The only thing that is different is the very last one. Everything else is exactly the same. So, but even the last one isn't actually all that different, because all it means is that in the Pali, you have the three higher knowledges, but in the Chinese you only have one of the three. That's the only difference there. Awakening just means one of the three higher knowledges. And this is not a real difference, because it means that in some suttas in the Pali, you have the three higher knowledges. Sometimes you only have awakening. In the Chinese, sometimes you only have awakening. Sometimes you have the three higher knowledges. So this varies depending on the sutta you're looking at. So actually it's not a real difference at all. So basically, they are the same. The only differences that we find is when you go into the details of each one of these, you'll find some differences in detail. So for example, under virtue, you find not drinking alcohol, being one of them, which is found in the Chinese version, but not found in the Pali version. And sometimes the Pali version has a bit more detail when it comes to the minor ethics and morality, which is not found in the Chinese. So there's a little bit of differences there, but essentially they are exactly the same.
And the similes are different as some.
So yeah, so it has more similes in the version in Chinese, and the Dharmaguptaka version found in the Dirgha Agama has also more similes actually to it as well. So I had a quick look at that yesterday as well. So this is kind of great news. So we you get the feeling of I don't know. It's nice to know that we are probably have the essential elements of the word of the Buddha after 2,500 years, still kind of available to us. Okay, so do you want to talk about this one, Venerable?
No, you keep going.
Sure.
Yeah, I have my slides.
Yeah, you have your slides. Okay, all right. So what we are seeing here. So these are the factors that we have been seeing already. These factors are what we have been seeing already. I have kind of grouped them together a little bit. And now we want to see the additional factors found outside of this particular sutta. Remember, we're looking at the Chulahati Padopama Sutta. the Shorter Sutta on the elephant's footprint. Now I want to show what do some of the other suttas bring in as additional factors to the gradual training.
But before you go, that Chulahati Padopama sequence is the most common sequence found in majority of the suttas as well.
Right. So that is the standard sequence. That's why we have chosen
Chinese,
that. And now we're going to look at some of the additional factors. Interesting. Wow, more. Okay. So just very briefly, you can see it here, the additional factors. We have the first one there is shame and fear of consequences, hiriyottapa. And hiriyottapa being obviously a very important part of the path. The sense that you become moral because you understand the dangers of immorality, or you become more virtuous because you understand the dangers of lacking of virtue, or you become more kind because you understand the dangers of not being kind. And that's what that is about. Shame and fear of consequences. You want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So that is also another way of looking at sila. If you are lazy to remember all the precepts, how many do you have, Ajahn? 227. Okay. Well, I have 311, you know.
That means you are better, because the more precepts, the better, right?
More precepts, yeah. So I had to remember all, and it's you would wonder, right? How do you remember so many precepts and keep all of them, and how to keep them? And it feels difficult. Sometimes it might feel overwhelming. But if you have this shame and fear, in the sense that is, you reflect about what you are about to do, and the consequences of it, whether it's hurtful or harmful technically, and whether it's going to lead you in a good direction or in the opposite direction of freedom. So this we can actually sort of feel in our heart. Even a little child can be made to understand this kind of thing. So if you have shame and consequences, that hiri and ottappa, so other precepts, the parts of the precepts part, even if you forget, you will be keeping them regardless. So it's nice. So it's not like anything different, it's the same thing. This is how you do right action, right speech, and things like that anyway. So it's just,
But it's interesting how it kind of emerges out of faith, isn't it?
So
faith, then comes how do you understand that connection?
The thing is, when the Buddha gives very graduated kind of teachings, he explains, the consequences of your actions. He talks about, the consequences of your intentional actions. The good intentions lead to good consequences. And in here and now itself, right, how do you feel if you snapped back at somebody, just said a small little lie? You don't feel good in the heart straight away, right? And if you spoke something really nice, gave somebody a beautiful compliment, words that goes to the heart, you feel good straight away, right? So Buddha sort of explains in like that, and when he explains the Dhamma, the people sort of understand, what he says makes sense, because this is not necessarily the understanding of karma before the time of the Buddha. If we have time, we might talk about these things. They had the idea of karma, but not in exactly the same way, and how to sort of overcome that, or how to deal with karma in the right way. Not overcome, but how to deal with karma in the right way so that you could be liberated. So once people sort of understand, because these are things you realize here and now, even during the discourse, so people gain some confidence. Yes, what this person is saying makes sense. And when they sort of understand that, then with that confidence, when they understand, okay, karma has consequences, then this moral shame and fear can come. Because many places the Buddha talks about the effects of your intentional wholesome and unwholesome karma, and the destinations that you could end up in as a result of those. So that is when somebody is then about to do something, they can reflect. There's a beautiful sutta, Ambalattika Rahulovada Sutta. The Buddha gives that very beautiful advice to his 7-year-old son. He says, what's the purpose of having a mirror? And the purpose of having a mirror is to see reflection. So he says, using in the same way, to reflect in your mind before you do something, or say something, or even think about something. Is that going to lead to hurt or harm to myself or to the other? If it is, then don't do it. But whatever you do by body, speech and mind, if it is not going to be harmful and hurtful to oneself and others, but in fact it has very positive, skillful outcome, then go ahead and do it. So this is that reflection that is Hiri and Ottappa is sort of, helping us to practice it. Yeah. So yeah.
Great, excellent. So so that is Hiri and Ottappa. It's interesting, the word shame. Sometimes that word is not kind of popular in modern discourse, how we speak about things. People often think shame is a bad thing, but I'm not so sure if it is a bad thing. It depends on how you use it. There's different kinds of shame. There's like shame that is imposed on you by society or by other people. That's kind of negative. But the inner sense of shame that you have, a personal sense of shame because of doing something bad, that's probably a positive, because it reminds you that what you're doing is not right. So it's a little bit, you have to define the word in the right way. So then we have the keeping the patimokkha. So patimokkha are the rules of the monastics. 227 for the monks, 311 for the nuns, which means the nuns are better because they have more rules. Isn't that true? Because that's kind of... I don't know, but usually it's like more rules better, right? 5 precepts, 8 is better than 5, 10 is better than 8, 220. So usually it's higher status the more rules you have. So that's kind of one way of thinking about this. But it's a complicated thing. I think actually the reality is that monks and nuns actually in real life have approximately the same number of rules. You just have to look at those rules in the right way, and then you'll see that. Anyway, so that is the kind of the monastic thing. On top of being virtuous, you have to keep all of these monastic rules. Then you can see there the idea of good mental conduct. And so that is added in one particular sutta, and so that is what the purity of the mind, and that is implied by some of these other ones, but here it is expressed directly in this particular sutta, but is implied in the whole gradual training. So it shows you variations. Then you have interesting moderation in eating and wakefulness. Venerable, this is your speciality.
Yes. In the sense, it is not one of the main ones, but they do come up in a few of the, as you can see, in a few of the Middle-length discourses, but also in the Chinese agamas, these come up, which means they are reasonably important, but if you don't do it, it doesn't stop you from getting enlightenment. But it is, I found from my own personal life, maybe you all can relate to this as well, how what you eat and how much you eat affects you. Right? You know this, if you be careful, lunch is coming up soon and there will be an incredible world's best restaurant here, right? Everybody brings their best kind of, food, and if you overeat, then the afternoon session, you won't be able to even understand or get anything out. How, what do you call carb coma? It's called, you have too much carbs and you feel sleepy, Yeah. Or the digestion, and if you have indigestion, it's even worse, right? So the kind of food you eat, and also the food, the chemicals, they can actually trigger all different kinds of neurotransmitters in your body. There are foods that are aphrodisiac and all different things. So, what you eat has a big effect on your body and on your mind, and how much you eat. So moderation is great, but just at the beginning, Leha was asking, how many of you were doing intermittent fasting? Buddha was the most fashionable. It is becoming a fashion now, intermittent fasting. But, all the monastics keep intermittent fasting. We eat 1 meal a day, so 23-hour fast, or we also can have 2 meals a day, so we can have still 18-hour fast. And now modern medicine knows how beneficial it is. It is actually self-curing. Your body has the time to cure and repair, which is great. So keeps the doctors away, And naturally, for monastics, this is helpful. We don't have money, and we live in the forest. not so close by to hospitals, so it's good that we have a very healthy lifestyle, and also for practitioners this is helpful. So moderation eating is also about that, so how often you eat, how much you eat, what you eat has a big effect on your practice. It can get in the way. For some people it doesn't matter, they have really good digestion and things like that, but so it is good that it is there. And wakefulness is not about putting a alarm clock and really gritting your teeth and with real difficulty waking at 3 o'clock in the morning, not like that. Some people might try that, but wakefulness actually happens naturally when you actually have eaten the right kind of amount and then easy to practice. So in the evening you start your meditation, and when the meditation is going on well, your mind is very awake, it's very energetic. It actually does not need much sleep. So most of you who've been on retreats would know when you're on a 9-day retreat, you don't need so much sleep. You naturally wake up early. Sometimes 4 hours of sleep is enough, sometimes 6, and you're very fresh. So that happens naturally, and it is helpful. And the other thing is also, I do realize sometimes when I see people on retreats, they sit for many hours, but they seem like they are a little bit sleepy. Not sleeping, but the mind is not that awake. Very cool, very peaceful, but also a little bit dull-ish. Right? And that is not as a wakeful state where insight can arise. So this is also really nice to know that, on the path, it's not about being very comfortable and then just, in a very dull, peaceful, cool state, but more energetic, uplifted state. And you have more and more of that, so that you actually can put forth in the right way I don't want to say effort, then I won't be a Ajahn Brahm student, but put into practice, make use of your time wisely. So that actually for me happens naturally when you have put in the right conditions, what goes before.
Okay, great. Sadhu. And then we have the 2 last additional factors here. We have the immaterial attainments. It occurs once in the gradual training, which is interesting. Usually these are left out. The 4 jhanas are enough, but they are not against the gradual training. They can be included, and that's what you're saying here. So these are like the higher, even higher kind of samadhi states. And then you have all the supernormal powers. Usually they are not there because they're not really a core part of what the Dhamma is about. The Dhamma is about overcoming suffering. But also, it can lead to all of these supernormal powers. And are they real? Well, it seems to be real, right? They're right there in the suttas. And sometimes you observe certain things as a monastic, you think, surely these things are real. That's kind of cool, So you can do things like walking through walls and sinking into the ground and walking on water, So we are even more, we can do more than Jesus could only walk on water, but we can walk through walls as well, so yay! So these are the supernormal powers, and so it's kind of fascinating. The world is much more interesting than you think sometimes. Anyway, that gives you a broader idea of the gradual training, the various kinds of versions of it. Let's quickly have a look at a couple of more slides before we have a break.
But it's 9:30 already.
We'll stop at 13. That's a good place to stop. Let's just go to 2 more slides. So this is the one of the alternative expressions of the gradual training. In fact, it is barely the gradual training. The reason I've called it that is because it starts in the same way with the Buddha arising in the world. But you can see the last part here is very short. Instead of having the sense restraint and all of that, you have good mental conduct, and then you have the divine abidings, the Brahma Viharas instead. And that, of course, stands for the jhanas and for the samadhi. So this is like a short version, and you will notice here there is no going forth. And so this also applies to lay people. So this is like the lay people's gradual training, if you wish. And that's kind of nice, isn't it? The 4 Brahma Viharas, you just practice lots of metta, and bing, maybe you become enlightened as a consequence. Maybe.
You sound like instantaneous enlightenment.
That's true. Okay, I withdraw that to Bing, actually. So, so that's a beautiful short version. Now you can see why it is and how it is that so many suttas fit into the framework of the gradual training. Yeah, you can see it here now. This is quite different from what we normally see, but clearly it has the same kind of general content and general progress, if you like. So there's one quick more sutta. This one here shows you the same sutta, and here it shows you in context with the other factors of the gradual training here. You can see what is missing. What is missing is all the things in red. Yeah, the things in red is what you find in the ordinary gradual training, but you don't find in this sutta. And then the blue is what you find in addition in the sutta, you don't find in the ordinary gradual training here. So you can see it is contracted, but it fits in with the overall scheme of things. Okay, so that is a good place to take a short break. Should we have a Q&A? Let's have some Q&A first, then we can have a quick break afterwards.
Shall we meditate for a bit?
We meditate during the break. Yeah. So some people you do whatever they want, and some people meditate a bit. Or maybe we should. Yeah. Okay. Let's have the break first, then we can do the Q&A afterwards. Let's have a quick break. So just do a bit of meditation, and those of you who need to stretch your legs or use the toilet or whatever, this is a good opportunity. Yeah. I think we should probably carry on actually, because time is short, very short. And so, so just a little bit of rest time is, I think, all we have time for. So now we would like to invite people to ask some questions and make comments or whatever. So please feel free to raise any issues that are... Okay, so Moira.
Thank you very much, Ajahn. In a number of the suttas, they end after the sutta, it says, such and such a mendicant or venerable enlightened, and I find that initially when I was reading that, I guess it sort of indicates things are not gradual, it seems to be instantaneous. So when I was first reading suttas in Buddhist, I was thinking, oh, you could get enlightened so quickly. And also then later there was disbelief. And so I'm just wondering whether those are the words of the Buddha, because when someone gets enlightened, generally other people don't know, so someone needs to know what enlightenment is and know the other people's minds. So I'm just wondering, Buddha wouldn't have indicated such and such person in his discourse. So why are those passages written about such and such person enlightened, and who would have added such passage?
Well, the little bit I'm going to add to that is actually the Buddha would know when somebody is enlightened, because an enlightened person can know another enlightened person. So it is, we can't just discard saying that the Buddha didn't say, maybe not in all of those places, but if the Buddha did say at the end of the discourse, everybody in the audience, or 50% or however many, that could be true. And it is kind of inspiring, but what we may forget if we don't know and the suttas well and put it into context is these are people who've been practicing. So that was that occasion, a time that they just heard something that was helpful to trigger an insight. But that doesn't mean that they were not practicing before. So they have already started the process, and a lot of these suttas are to monastics, so they have already met the Buddha. Sorry, Venerable Mudita is trying to... Okay, so they have started the process. So the gradual process is already in there, and they're doing their meditation regularly, so they are on there. So that part we need to understand by understanding the suttas in general, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I don't disbelieve that, that the Venerables didn't become, I do believe that they would have enlightened, and I understand that they, in previous lives they might have done practices which led them to samadhi, so it was easy for them to become enlightened. But I'm just wondering who would have, whether that was added by the council, or did the Buddha actually talk about other people being enlightened at the end of his discourse?
Yeah, I think there's probably many things going on. Usually when you have this idea that people get enlightened or whatever, very often the Buddha gives a graduated training, on dana, generosity, on morality, on the danger of sensuality, the blessing of renunciation, and then he gives the teaching on the Four Noble Truths. And if you look at that structure, it really leads up to samadhi, because the idea of renunciation is basically the same thing as the idea of samadhi. Yeah. So what you're seeing there is basically people are taken to samadhi. Because they're taken to samadhi, they have in a sense fulfilled that gradual training all the way to what is required for awakening to happen. And so sometimes I think the way that these suttas should be understood, they should be understood as a contraction of what may have happened over a long period of time. So the Buddha gives a teaching, but actually this teaching happens over a long period, maybe over a year, or many months or whatever. And so this is just kind of gives the highlight. Because all of those suttas pretty much are not actually the word of the Buddha. They are a narration. It says the Buddha came, he gave this kind of teaching, they got enlightened. It doesn't actually say, the Buddha doesn't say, listen monks, and gives a talk. It's just a contraction of what happened. That's one way of thinking about it. The other way is, as you say, that the idea of the awakening itself was often added at the first council, because the first council is where the context of the suttas is given. It's given at the first council. Venerable Ananda gives the suttas, and then the questioner, who is Venerable Kassapa, asks, where was this spoken? And that where, and all of that is the context. That was added probably at that time or later on. That would have included the number of people who got enlightened. And by that time, they've probably forgotten. Or how many people? Well, I can't remember, maybe it was 2. No, I think it was 100. Okay, let's go with 100, it sounds better. I'm exaggerating, but you get the kind of rough idea of how things may happen, right? Memory is uncertain and all of these kind of things. And one of the interesting things in the suttas is precisely that when you compare the versions, like the agamas and the suttas, is that these numbers vary enormously. In some places the monks go forth, in another place they just say sadhu. It's the same sutta, but it's the kind of the ending is very different. And so these are not to be taken too seriously. Occasionally the Buddha says they did get enlightened, like in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the setting in motion the wheel of the Dhamma. The Buddha says Anya Kondanya has become a stream entry. But that's very, very rare in the suttas. I think that might be one of the very, very few ones where that happens. Usually it's like a narrative, it's part of some broader idea. But we have to give the microphone to Venerable Mudito because he...
Here I am.
Yeah.
Sorry, I have to go and I have to ask the cheeky questions. Right? Is that my job?
You have to listen to the answer before you go, otherwise you...
Oh, no, I don't have time. I have to go. Unfortunately, I'm going to Dana. But that's why I can ask the cheeky questions. So I'm not here to get the consequences. But I want to get this onto... I will listen to it later on YouTube. But you talk about on the previous one, you said that, it leads to Brahma Viharas, right? Brahma Viharas is one of the high attainments. So it was Buddha then teaching for lay people to go to heaven. I know one monk is actually teaching that. And I was like, I listened to him teaching that, and I was like, no. Then I started to think about, maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe Buddha did teach a lot of lay people to go to heaven. What do you think about that? Why did we teach the Brahma Viharas? It is actually like heavenly realm. Okay, gotta go now.
You have to answer.
Me?
I can answer after you.
You can answer? Okay, I'll get started then. So now I'm answering to the big void because he has left. But anyway, I think the simple answer is that the path to being reborn in the Brahma realm and the path to awakening is basically the same. You're doing all the same factors, and many people, the majority of people, will stop before awakening. That's kind of obvious, because awakening is very profound, and the majority of people will maybe get reborn in the Deva Loka, or, if you practice really well, in the Brahma Loka. So the Buddha gives this as a foundation, and then, if you get to that point, then you may gain a further teaching. It takes you all the way to awakening, and there are examples of that in the suttas. Once you have that established, then you go further. The point is that the path is the same. They're not different paths. And so that is kind of, to me, resolves that kind of issue.
Yeah, so, very familiar sutta to everybody is the Metta Sutta, the loving kindness sutta, Karaniya Metta Sutta, or the same sutta. And people think that the point of that sutta is to spread the loving kindness, metta. But if you actually understand and read it really well, that sutta is all about getting fully enlightened. Somebody who's intent on reaching the highest peace, this is what should be done. And as Ajahn said so clearly, metta or Brahma Viharas is a path, a signpost that you all will be crossing as you are reaching. Because when your mind is in stillness, metta and the Brahma Vihara states, equanimity, are there already. But and also people think that practicing Brahma Viharas leads you only to the Brahma realms, but it is not the case, even in the Karaniya Metta Sutta, but also if you want to check Metta Sahagatena Sutta, which is in Sangyutta Nikaya, Bojjhanga Sangyutta, which is 46, Sutta number 58, I believe, or 48, whichever one. The Buddha talks about also in a similar way how you develop metta. So because this 4 Brahma Vihara practice was in existence before the time of the Buddha. This was quite a common practice. And in fact, in this Metta Sahagatena Sutta, the non-Buddhist practitioners ask, so we also spread Metta, Karuna, Mudita, Upekkha, the 4 divine abidings. You guys do it as well. So what's the difference between us? Right? Interesting question. So this is also what is interesting about the way the Buddha taught. He taught things that people were familiar, but with a slight difference. But that is not a slight difference, because sometimes, a tiny little angle difference here, you can't hardly see, but you go far, it goes to 2 different places, right? So like that, you make a slight different change, sometimes much more significant change. And the practice may look from outside the same thing, but it leads to different places. In Metta Sahagatena Sutta, the Buddha specifically says, if somebody asks, how do you practice metta? You ask 4 questions in return. I'm going to say in Pali, so you know this was the word of the Buddha. He says, ask them, King Gatika, King Parama, King Pala, King Pariyosana. So 4 things. What is the path that you develop your Brahma Viharas? What does it have as its leader? What fruits do you get, and what is its end result? Right? So I don't have time to go in detail into this, but the end result, the Buddha says, you will either get fully enlightened. So the 4 Brahma Viharas is to full enlightenment, but for whatever reason, if you fall short, then you will end up in a Brahma realm. And then from there, you would get enlightened. So like Ajahn said, it's just part of the path. So Brahma Vihara was, not anything addition or not to be surprised either. Yeah.
Okay, I think Ananda wanted. We have to respect venerables.
Ajahn, thank you for nice course. And you mentioned, Ajahn, that in the Anguttara Nikaya only 1 sutta in that slide. But I think perhaps I was thinking it must be the detailed version. But if you look at the Avijja Sutta 1061 and Tanha Sutta 1062, it starts from the Kalyanamitta and then ends with the enlightenment.
It's coming up.
It is summing up. It's the easiest way to understand as well. So I think, and also what you have been teaching, Ajahn, that Kimatya and the Chetana Karaniya 10.1 and 10.2, Anguttara. So I think because Buddha says in, I think Upadda Sutta, SN 45.2, that Ananda addressing the Venerable Ananda Mahatero, that Ananda take me as the your Kalyanamitta. So that is the rising of the Buddha starts in that the Avijja and Tanha Sutta 1061 and 1062. So if you include them, there may be quite a few suttas that in the Anguttara Nikaya as well, Ajahn.
I mean, yes, there are many. If you look, like Ajahn said at the very beginning, almost all the suttas, actually you can trace back to Gradual Training. So what we have pulled out is very specifically talking in that way, presenting Gradual Training. I mean, we are going to be presenting Avijja Sutta and things because it provides also quite an extended version, which is nice. But what Ajahn has pulled out is specific ones that actually talks like that. Otherwise,
and the other one I just wanted to ask you is now, Ajahn, you said Chulahattapadopama is mainly for monastics, but Buddha discoursed that to Brahmin Janusoni and Pilokitta, and they were both, they were worse than lay people, because they were belonging to other religions, Brahmanism. But what you are saying is that the details are for the... And also Venerable Great Arahan, Venerable Mahinda Thero, he discoursed that to the king and the other lay people. So included.
I was just pointing it out to be controversial, just to make fun, so that we have a starting point for discussion. We're going to get back to that later on, because I want to answer that question later on. But that was just to be naughty. So I apologize for being naughty. But you're absolutely right, of course. So we'll have a look at that later on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Ajahn, yeah, perhaps you might be coming to these later on. Instantaneous enlightenment, some people believe that Bahya managed that without realizing that he has been practicing for eons for that. So therefore, that's an exception. Yeah. Might mention that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a comment.
Yes,
Yeah, nice comment.
That's
yeah.
a comment, and you can expand on that if you like. Thank you.
I don't think there are any exceptions to that. I think that that there is no other path than the Noble Eightfold Path. Es eva maggo nati anyo, as it says in the Dhammapada. This is the only path, there is no other. So you have to do that. So you would have to assume that Bahya also had samadhi. Either he had samadhi, as the commentary explains, from a previous life, and so already he was endowed with that in this life, or maybe he achieved that samadhi while the Buddha was talking, and maybe this extended over a bit more time than it seems in the sutta. So he would have had those factors fulfilled, otherwise it would be impossible. The gradual training is always, samadhi is the cause for seeing things according to reality. Samadhi is a necessary ingredient. Without it, it's impossible, basically. So it would, somehow it is there. But remember the Bhaya Sutta, first of all, it's very short. It doesn't have much details to it. Secondly, all of these things are found, if you look at, it's found in the Udana. The Udana has a story, and then it has a verse. The verses are more authentic than the stories. The stories vary a lot across the different versions of the Udana. So even that story might be a bit dodgy. So there's lots of things here that we can be dug into and So I don't think this proves any alternative thing, to be honest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Yeah.
So,
Shall we get back to the teaching now?
Yeah, I think, Prem, time is running out, so I think we better stop. We can have to do more questions this afternoon, but I think now we're going to have to carry on, otherwise we will run into problems. So, Karunika, would you like to carry on?
Yeah, okay. So I just loved this simile. This is from the Nagara Sutta in Samyutta Nikaya. Just want to read it out just to start this session. Suppose bhikkhus, a man wandering through a forest, discovers an ancient path once trodden by people long ago. Following it, he finds the remains of a great city, once vibrant with parks, groves, and ponds. He reports his discovery to the king, who restores the city, and in time it thrives again, prosperous, filled with people, and renewed in its former glory. And then, very beautifully, the Buddha actually, it was a simile, so he says, so too, bhikkhus, I saw the ancient path, the ancient road once traveled by the perfectly enlightened ones of the past. That ancient path is none other than the Noble Eightfold Path: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right stillness. Following that path, I directly knew aging and death, their origin, their cessation, and the way leading to their cessation. Having realized these truths, I have declared them to monks, nuns, and lay followers. Thus, this holy life has become successful and prosperous, well established and widespread among both devas and humans. So the reason why I brought this up again is to say that, like Ajahn said at the very beginning, even though this course is about the gradual training, and previously we had a workshop dedicated to Noble Eightfold Path, so we wonder, is it a repeat then? Because we've already done, and this was the Buddha's discovery, right? So what is the connection between, and how can we see? This came up in my mind. Like, the Buddha says, just like Ajahn just mentioned a few minutes ago as well, the only path, the leading to liberation is the Noble Eightfold Path. So anybody who gets enlightened would have walked that path or done that practice. Yet when we had seen the gradual training sequence, it didn't quite look exactly the same. So this is why I just wanted to bring out, this is the, so I sort of had that question, in my mind. Why did the Buddha present a gradual training in this way? So this is again that sequence that we just saw, the most common sequence without the additional parts, just to have a look. And this is the Noble Eightfold Path. So that you have the two side by side just to see. So when you look at the names of these things, they seem, different, and maybe some things are missing, some things are added. So and when you actually contemplate and try to understand what's the difference, or are they the same, is that Noble Eightfold Path is more like the doctrinal kind of teaching, like the blueprint of the path, like what to do. But gradual training is like the more practical aspect, actually what you do. Like when you read those suttas, the Buddha talks about, somebody starting, going to the monastery. First of all, it's arising of the Buddha. And you wonder, what's the big deal? What's about arising of the Buddha? What happened there? But arising of the Buddha, you would see in the suttas, is the arising of a right view. Right? He breaks through at the time of enlightenment. That's what it is. He breaks through to right view. So the Noble Eightfold Path, that whole path that he's mentioned before, that's part of that right view. So that is why Buddha arising in the world, and then he explains the teachings based on that right view and right understanding. So even though in the gradual training we can't see right view is right there, but in a more practical way, Buddha arising, then you're going to meet the Buddha, hearing the teaching, and gaining the confidence. And then when it comes to this going forth, right? Going forth happens, and that is a right intention. So if you know your right intentions, the aspects, it's renunciation, the first one. Yeah, so renunciation is another way we talk about going forth. You renounce the sensual world. You leave your house, your crowded house with all of its things, and you shave off your head and beard for men, for us just the head, and put on the ochre robes, and you go forth, right? So that is part of that right intention in action, right? Here you talk about what right intention is. Here it's seen as doing, and it's also very time and place. These things are events, big events. So even if it is not going forth, but what this also represents is once you gain that faith, this is the time that you truly take on board the teachings. This is the time that you decide to keep the 5 precepts. Or last night we had this beautiful ceremony of few people taking 8 precepts for a longer period of time. So that kind of event, it's kind of like a going forth in their mind, in the sense, to really commit yourself to the path. So that happens, and that's part of that right intention. And then in the next slide, actually, you can see this much better. So here you can see this association with the wise, hearing the Dhamma, gaining faith. That is part of the right view. And then going forth is part of the right intention. Then, of course, right action and right speech are there just in a similar way. And then the contentment part. So contentment comes mostly, with the monastics. We have contentment with the 4 requisites, but contentment is very helpful regardless, even for anybody who's practicing, because discontent and having too many desires for things, you can see how that can lead to problems. And also if you have few wishes, path becomes easy. So, however, which is interesting, in the right Noble Eightfold Path, it is a right livelihood, and in the gradual training, it is the contentment part, because that is the livelihood, monastic livelihood, a very simple livelihood. In the lay life, you need to go to work, you have to have a job to earn money to fulfill your 4 requisites. What are your needs? You need food to eat, clothes to protect your body, some place to stay, like a shelter, and medicines, right? So in order to do that, you need to just work and earn. So the Buddha says that livelihood you need to think about carefully, and there are wrong livelihoods to be avoided. But once you are monastic, So this is our livelihood. So we practice, we get the basic 4 requisites by a foot of a tree, some arms round which you beg with your begging bowl, and some simple robes, rag robes even, and urine as your medicine, yeah, the simple kind of 4 things that comes to you, so you don't actually have to work, but then you have the monastic livelihood. So monastic livelihood is also given, I'll be talking about this a little bit more with Ajahn Mudito in the next workshop, but that's just to show the comparison. And then this sense restraint and situational awareness is part of this right effort, which is a very important part. But when you just see this sequence only, you don't see right effort, but that is in operation. So it's nice to see how these are working. And then there is seclusion and giving up of the hindrances is about right mindfulness, and right stillness and jhanas, pretty much the same thing. And then we also hear very often sila, samadhi, panya, so you can also map that into both the gradual training and into Noble Eightfold Path.
So what about the Tevijja? How do they fit with the Noble Eightfold Path?
After that, because you need stillness, and then insight arises. Yeah. So you wanted to put that into the slide. I didn't have time, so you can speak about it.
Well, it doesn't really fit, right? Because it's not actually found on the Noble Eightfold Path. But then you have the tenfold, not path, because it's not called a path in the suttas, but the tenfold factors or whatever, and they have samma jnana and samma vimutti, those who, in other words, right knowledge and right liberation that you find, and that would be equivalent to the Tevijja. So when you expand it into tenfold path, then you have it. Yeah. Okay.
So is that clear? So that they are not 2 different things, but it's more like the practical way of how you will be actually doing things is what this gradual training about. So, but to see that these are the path factors that are working, so I want to go a little bit more into. So here is what Ananda was talking about, Avijja Sutta, Anguttara 1061, which is quite beautiful. I love this sutta, and I'm sure one of Ajahn Brahmali's favorites, and he talks about this in almost every retreat, because it's a very beautiful way of presenting the gradual training without having to really call it that, because it is actually a very practical way of understanding. However, it has some small changes which I think you might notice here. In the gradual training, situation awareness is after sense restraint. However, in Avijja Sutta, it's before that. What's going on? It's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting to see situational awareness, the positioning, as an important one. It's a really important one. Before I go into talking about that, I'm just bringing it up for your awareness, because there are some little changes, and there is this right conduct by body, speech and mind coming up here. And then there is this right action, right speech up here. So what is the connection? What is the difference? Because these sound like sila or virtue or morality. Oh, what would you like to call it, Ajahn? How would you translate sila?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's a difficult word to translate. I think the best translation for sila is probably virtue. I think it's the best one. I think it is the most comprehensive kind of term. But you can translate it as ethics and morality, which I think emphasizes not doing the bad. You could maybe translate it as kindness, but that emphasizes the good side of things. It's more like metta. But I think overall, I think virtue is probably the best one. Anyway.
Okay. Yeah. So the purpose of this slide is mainly to show, because the question here is it strictly sequential, the path? Because this is what we were talking before as well with Ajahn, is, do you have to do it in that same order? Is it sequential? Is it all the factors important? So these are the things that naturally come into our mind, right? So when you have a whole thing. So here, I'm just putting just a small extract from the sutta, the 7 factors of enlightenment. So this is the last bit here. This go further than that, but I just stopped it there for now. Have a nutriment. They are not without nutriment. And what is the nutriment for 7 factors of enlightenment? It should be said the 4 establishments of mindfulness. So the Buddha says, this the one that comes before is a nutriment for the one that comes after. So nutriment is something, a sustenance, right? So it shows that sequence build up. So in the same way, if you look at into here, so association of the wise is the starting nutriment. So Buddha arising in the world, and he sort of distribute nutritious food or nutrition to us, and we take it up, right? This is how it starts. It's a beautiful way to think. It's, Buddha is feeding us these beautiful, nutritious things for our mind to purify our mind and to release. So from starting from there, then, here in the Dhamma is a nutriment for gaining faith and even going forth if one wish to, but if not, the most important part, even though it doesn't even come up here, this wise attention. So wise attention in Pali is yoniso manasikara. So many people hear this. And for people who are very interested in becoming stream winners or any form of attainments, it's the stream winning is sotapatti. So sotapatti anga, the factors that are necessary for becoming an Aryan. So what are these for? So first one is sappurisa sevana. That means you associate with the wise. Second one is saddhamma savana, that is hearing the teachings. Those two come up in this sequence. And the third one is wise attention, yoniso manasikara. The fourth one is dhammanudhamma patipatti, that is applying yourself onto the path. So even though in here, this doesn't come up as the word, that yoniso manasikara has to be there for the path to work, because it is an essential factor for awakening. It is something that what you do, that's the external. So external two things, so that's the internal thing. External two things is having a Buddha or Kalyana Mittas and hearing the teaching. And then wise attention, how do you attend, how do you direct your mind towards things, makes a huge difference in which direction you are going to go, whether you're going to head towards freedom or away from freedom. And then with that also comes how you apply yourself in your life and direct your practice. So therefore, I really like this sequence, because this is a very essential factor that is hidden here. But that is why we can't just, depending on one sutta, you get a combination of suttas, and then you put them, map them into there, and then you understand. So it's a very essential part. And wise attention is about looking into applying these teachings, so seeing through. So even right view, I believe, can come, right? Right aspects of right view is you see through and you attend to the outside world. The way you direct your mind is through right view, then you will be attending wisely. How do you know whether you are attending wisely? If you are attending wisely, wholesome mind states will be increasing. But if you have more and more negative mind states coming up, you can be sure you are attending unwisely. Right? So that's a good gauge every time to see. Then you slowly understand, because wise attention is very important.
And that idea you just mentioned now is actually straight out of the suttas. So many of these things are actually straight out of the suttas. And that is the main definition of yoniso manasikara in the suttas, found in the Sabbasava Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya number 2. So it's a very important one.
Yeah.
Now, what you were saying now about what the definition of yoniso manasikara. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, and then what happens, the Buddha says, so wise attention is a nutriment for situational awareness. Sati Sampajanya comes as a result. Because once you are attending, once your mind understands right view, then that mindfulness and awareness springs up. But they have feedback loop. That's the other interesting thing. All of these factors, while they have a sequential progression, they also feed back. So the first time you start, it builds up like that, but after that, they feed each other. So yoniso manasikara helps to improve your sati sampajanya, And Sati Sampajanya in return helps your wise attention. And then of course, Sati Sampajanya, so mindfulness and awareness. The way that I like to understand this is, so when it comes to mindfulness, people often talk about or think about like awareness, like heightened awareness. But just awareness isn't enough, isn't it? So it's just, you know what is going on, but knowing what, why, and how. This is important. So this is where that sampajanya means that wisdom aspect comes in. The knowledge of the Dhamma comes in. So you're not only aware. I mean, some people are not even aware of what they're doing. Has anybody gone into autopilot when they drive? And then got into trouble because every day after work you go home. One day you had to go somewhere else, but you ended up home when you were supposed to go to the shops on the way. You know, so were you not aware driving? No, you had awareness, you were aware, but what were you missing? Why were you doing, how you were doing, that kind of things were missing. So you know the difference between just awareness and Sati Sampajanya. So whatever you are doing, you have mindfulness, but your mindfulness also know why you're doing this, whatever that you're doing, and how you're doing it. Are you doing it in a way that is harmful, difficult? Your unwholesome mind states are increasing. I always bring up this, some people love to bring dana, for example, and they're cooking dana, and it's a wholesome thing, right? To give food to somebody else is a nice thing to do. But in that process, they get very worked up because things maybe burn or things running late, the kids are screaming. I'm sure people are familiar. In that process of preparing the dana and getting to the monastery, some people come with literally steam coming out of their ears because they were rushing, too much pressure, and the way they speak to each other is not so nice. So what has happened? They were essentially doing something that is wholesome, but how they were doing wasn't skillful. Unskillful mind states were coming. So you can see sometimes you're trying to do something skillful, but how you do makes a difference. So this is where Sati Sampajanya is very helpful, that you know that you are aware of what you're doing. You're aware of why you are doing it and how you're doing it. So this is necessary. So this is necessary then to be able to do sense restraint. So even in this gradual training, situation awareness would come up earlier as well. But then when your senses are more restrained, of course, you have much more heightened awareness. Yeah, so that the next level. So these are degrees of things, right? Degrees of mindfulness and clear comprehension that increases over time. And so therefore it is okay that it is in both places. They are in fact in all of those places and they feed each other. And the other thing that I want to bring up is that here, this sounds like virtue and this sounds like virtue as well. What is the difference, or is there a difference, or why are they in two different places? So for this, I like to see this as like the precepts in initial part. So when we first start, we will come back into that later. It's like our minds are like a wild beast, right? Our minds with all these desires, anger, ego, defilements, right? So our minds are like that. And once you start the process of going to peace, to freedom, to purity, it is hard. We all know that, how hard it is to tame our wild beast of a mind, right? So then, first of all, we need to put it into some kind of a frame, some kind of a place. So this is coming up beautifully in the afternoon. We are going to go through the Dantabhumi Sutta. This is about training an elephant simile. So the precepts are the basic guidelines. So you keep them. So even if it is hard, because you've now taken on the precept, you will keep it. Even if you have to put a little bit of force, you can't break it, you keep it. But it might be difficult, so in the beginning, but it's a helpful aid. But when it comes to here, conduct by body, speech and mind, right conduct, that is much more of a natural blossoming of that very virtue. Because by the time when your senses are restrained, right? When your senses are restrained, your actions by body and speech and mind would be good, would be wholesome. Because that's what you will learn in the next couple of classes. They will put more emphasis on understanding sense restraint, which is supported by right effort, coming up and going deep. So I won't go into detail, but you will understand how, when you are able to keep sense restraint well, a sila or virtue becomes almost like a fruit. It just happens almost quite beautifully, quite easily. And keeping sila, keeping virtue becomes easy and natural. That's why it is in here, in this place. So that's those are things. So to understand, is it strictly sequential? Yes, there is a sequence. And there are feedback loops, but also to understand there are other things that the Buddha also talks about that may not be visible here, that we can still map into the right spot. So as you read the suttas, it is important to keep that in mind. Anything you would like to add, Ajahn?
No, it's okay.
No?
Yeah, good enough. Yeah.
Good enough. The next one I wanted to bring up is this Anguttara Nikaya 881, Sati-sampajanya Sutta. So this sutta's name itself is situational awareness, or mindfulness and comprehension. So that sutta, it starts with Sati-sampajanya. The Buddha says the path starts with having mindfulness and clear comprehension or situational awareness. So what about all of these? So, this wouldn't happen without these. We saw in the other sutta. So not to just say, in this sutta, it starts like that, therefore the other parts are not important. But how would you get situational awareness without the other? So just to remember, it is there. But it could happen without having to go forth. So even anybody, even a lay person, or anybody can build this up. So as long as you have heard right view, whether it was from the Buddha or after the time of the Buddha, by hearing the teaching, like coming to a workshop like this even, and you start applying yourself, you can develop Sati-sampajanya. That very basic Sati-sampajanya is the starting point, because once you have some degree of mindfulness, awareness of what are you doing, how are you carrying yourself through the day is necessary. And then you can change into how you do, why you do, and then see, whether shame and dread would come up with some of your actions by body and speech, how to restrain yourself. So all of that comes up there, so you can see how these are related. And then how you would restrain your senses. And then your virtue becomes very natural, and it just then after that has jhana. It just has skipped things, but other things are still included there, because it is still there. So not to think, okay, because this sequence only have this, that means you don't need other things. It doesn't happen when you understand how these things happen. That Buddha just wants to highlight some of these things just to show, but this also show that it is sequential, because in this one, the Buddha says, when there is no situation awareness, the sense of moral shame and moral dread lack their proximate cause. So this is word of the Buddha, lack the proximate cause. So this is a proximate cause for situational awareness, is a proximate cause for the arising of moral shame and dread. And then they will feed back. They will all feed back to each other to strengthen the factors as you go forward. But to begin with, so the other one, it was shown as nutriment. In here, it's shown as a proximate cause. So this is the only part that I wanted to bring up here. And I think, would you like to add some?
No, I think that's nice. All of these suttas are really great, and they show you kind of variations on the theme. And I think all of these ones are very, very, very helpful for understanding how to practice. It's great, yeah.
Yeah, shall we go till we bust to the next myth?
Yeah, finish off. There's at least two more which are the same theme. So
Yeah. So this is again, is it strictly sequential? So this one I have taken up from Majjhima Nikaya 117, Mahachattārisika Sutta, which is very beautiful. So this is not a gradual training that name comes up, it is about the Noble Eightfold Path, which we now know are pretty much more or less the same thing. And here, so what bhikkhus is the Noble Right Samadhi? I just put Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation here, with its supports and its requisites. This is a right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness. Unification of the mind equipped with these 7 factors is called noble right stillness with its supports and its requisites. So the reason why I wanted to just briefly mention this is very often there is this understanding that people can just find some kind of unique technique, and by just doing that technique you sort of get into deep meditation, and this is also that instantaneous enlightenment, or you can bypass all these other things and you can get into deep meditation and you get the insights and you get enlightened. But here the Buddha says Samma Samadhi is actually, according to him, how he defines this is that it is based on the other 7 factors that went before. So samadhi, Samma Samadhi has to be developed based on right view, right intention, and all that aspects of sila, speech, right action, right speech, livelihood, then putting on the right effort and right mindfulness. That is the right samadhi. So if you just use a funny kind of technique to sort of, concentrate your mind or make your mind powerful and expect to get it. Because this is very common. People think, oh, no need to worry about sila, no need to, do all these other things. Just, meditate and you'll get enlightened. But it's not so. And the other interesting thing is also the idea of jhanas and deep meditation. Those words were there before the time of the Buddha. But the way the Buddha talks about jhana or samma samadhi is always based on this. And this is also what is very unique about how the Buddha taught the path to liberation. So that's why I just wanted to bring that. And in the next slide we said therein bhikkhus, right view comes first. And how does right view comes first? One understand wrong view as wrong view and right view as as right view. So there are many ways to understand these aspects. So in this sutta, it's quite beautiful. Let's keep going for a bit, then I'll explain the whole thing. And one makes an effort to abandon wrong view and enter upon right view. This is one's right effort, right? So this is still with the first factor, but you can see how right effort comes in to the right view, in relation to right view. And mindfully one abandons wrong view, mindfully one enters upon and abides in right view. This is one's right mindfulness. So the whole point of this sutta, and it goes on for every aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path, these 3 things, right view, right effort, and right mindfulness comes. They always help. So just to show that even though the Noble Eightfold Path or the Gradual Training is sequential, still some of those factors actually help each factor. They come and support each one. So even though it's sequential, then it's also got that feedback loop and few of them come together and help. So which is interesting to see. You have something to say? No? Thus these 3 states run and circle around right view, that is right view, right effort, and right mindfulness. And, sorry? Yeah, but it is the 4 jhanas, is what you get. Yes, that's true. Because even somebody says they have jhana, but if they have like that kind of very deep mind state, but if they have wrong view, this is where Ajahn Brahm sometimes explain about some of the other mystic religions. People also have really deep meditation experiences, but because they have the view that it's God or it's with the Brahma, they perceive it as unification with the Brahma. So that wrong view itself stopped them clearly seeing. Yes, yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, but they are not the jhanas according to how the Buddha explains. That's the thing. So that's what we want to bring up. You hear the same term, right? So you hear jhana. Also in Upanishads, it's there. The word is there. But how Buddha calls it, what was the difference? So the Buddha says deep meditation achieved based on the other 7 factors is what can liberate your mind, take your mind to freedom. The other things will not take you to freedom. You are stuck, and which is what the Bodhisattva, before the Buddha became enlightened in his last life, practicing under Alara Kalama and Uddakarama Putta, he reached some deep meditative states, but because he didn't have other factors, he realized, I'm still not finished, I will be really still born, suffering is still not ended. This is when he abandoned. So this is important to understand that the gradual training, all of these factors are necessary. So the last factor before the insights, which is the unification of the mind or jhanas, has to be based on the other 7. So that's one of the points that I wanted to make with this, and this last slide just wraps it up. Therein bhikkhus, right view comes first. And how does right view comes first? In one of right view, right intention comes to being. In one of right intention, right speech comes into being. In one of right speech, right action comes to being. In one of right action, right livelihood comes to being. In one of right livelihood, right effort comes into being. In one of right effort, right mindfulness comes into being. In one of right mindfulness, right stillness comes into being. So here in this sutta, it beautifully shows how it is both sequential and also it has those feedback loops and a few of those factors supporting each other. I have a question for you, Ajahn.
I don't think we have time for many more questions.
Then after lunch, I'm going to ask.
Yeah, let's carry on after lunch.
Okay.
What about, you want to finish this one off, or otherwise it's kind of part of the same?
So you want to say it?
No,
so the path factors, so whether there's this idea, the path factors can be practiced in any order. Has anybody thought like that? That you can practice in any order? So some people probably think, which is what we were looking at, but we have already explained how it has an order. Right? It has to be followed in the right order, otherwise there would be some very bad repercussions. So are everybody convinced that it has a right order and it needs to be followed? So then that myth is busted. Okay, but I'm still going to ask that question later.
Okay. Now we have to go because so there's no time for anything more. Afternoon, yeah, after. So we have the breakout session at 12 over Lehar. Do you have a theme for that session already? So, Venerable.
Okay, so I was thinking for the breakout sessions, is it 2 groups? 2 or 3, yeah?
3 maybe.
Okay, so maybe people can just contemplate how you can, from where you are, apply the gradual training to your own life. Gradual training by way of gradual training or Noble Eightfold Path, whichever way, maybe you can discuss as a group and present a summary of what people thought, how from there where you are at, you are applying your path. Is that a good topic to discuss? Yeah, so we'll be talking in detail in the afternoon session, so your minds are a little bit more ready to hear. Because I'm going to start the next session after lunch by, I can actually put that slide just for you to see, practice in every wakeful moment. Okay, so we are going to talk about it, but you can discuss it beforehand in your breakout session.
Okay, now we have to go. Okay, see you at 12:30. Yeah.